CNC Extreme. What we're going to talk about today is the install of the disc brake conversion kit on a Dana 44. What you're going to start with is your basic differential assembly, either in the vehicle or out, it doesn't matter. This is what the breakdown of it is going to look like once you get your drums off and get your shoes out. You're going to have on this assembly 4 bolts to pull the flange and the backing plate out of the assembly. Okay, now at this point what you need to do is get the whole axle assembly out of the differential housing. You may need this tool. What this is a slide hammer with a hub adapter. You take 2 of your lug nuts, slide this on, tighten your lug nuts, and you should be able to hit the back of this to pull the axle shaft assembly out of the axle housing. Okay, at this point you have your axle assembly out of your differential housing. At this point you may want to check, see if any of your bearings or the seal possibly could be leaking or worn to a point they need to be replaced. You do need to take this to a professional to have the work done. You need to have this pressed off and on and make sure that the retainer is put back in place. Set your axle assembly apart. If you want to start your install, you're going to open your box and find that you have a conglomerate of parts. You've got a pair of rotors, a pair of calipers, brake hoses, and 2 boxes of bracket kits. If you order the kit from us, most likely the kit's been gone through and sent only the parts that you need to do this install. Start the install. Obviously we've got a brand new axle assembly that has been new bearings, new everything installed, plus the actual adapter or spacer that you need for the kit. We have these custom machined for the Scout shoes. That's the exact width and spacing that would have taken place of the backing plate for your brake assembly. First step in assembly is making sure that the actual flange face is clean and the back side. The reason being, when you put these bolts back in, if they're not true and lined up straight, you're going to have a hard time putting your assembly back together. And mount the 4 bolts into the back of the flange. Obviously make sure they're clocked to the correct position because they are cut to where it sits on the back of the tube and clears. Okay, 4 bolts are in. The next thing you're going to do is install your axle shaft. You'll notice in the kit there should be a spacer that goes on in front of the retainer against the flange. What this is specifically built for the Scout 2 to take up the distance and spacing that you would have had on your actual backing plate with your drum brakes. Go ahead and install this. What you may want to do, make sure you put some grease around your seal area on the shaft and inside the housing, basically to kind of keep the heat down and make sure you get a good smooth surface. Okay, at this point we're going to go ahead and install our axle assembly into our housing. Takes a little work sometimes, get this to line up straight. Once it's there, take your spacer flange and the factory retainer, slide it all together, and go ahead and try and get the bolt started. This never lines up completely perfect, but once it's there, the assembly should slide together relatively easy. Okay, you've got your axle assembly set against into your housing. The next part we're going to talk about is a BR9B. This is the bracket assembly that you actually need to retain the caliper mounting bracket. you're going to want to make sure that you clock this in the proper direction. This hole should be towards the top. If you clock it wrong, your caliper will actually sit in the wrong direction. And go ahead, start it with your 4 bolts, or 3 on this. There's actually 3. As you can see here, we've got our bracket set against our flange on our housing. You've got the 3 bolts to retain it, and at this point you want to put your 4 bolts to retain the axle assembly into the housing. And the Scout 2s, the factory ones, actually have a hole built into the outside of the flange. This makes putting your 4 nuts back on your housing much easier. What I do to make this a little bit simpler is go ahead and load it into the socket and then line it up and get them started. And just turn your axle to start your next one. I usually start with opposites and line everything up. Just turn the assembly again and line up your bolt. This one's a little harder to turn because it's got a locker in it. And go ahead, tighten up your 4 nuts and bolts to hold your axle assembly into the flange. I go ahead and use a wrench to hold the backside to keep it from getting out of alignment from the actual tube, where I was showing you that the bolt head has a slit or a cut to where it stays true to the actual backing of the bracket. And turn your assembly again and get into your flanged hole, and then just hold that where that bolt stays straight against the flange. Okay, got your 4 bolts tight. Now, next most important thing you're going to do is make sure that this still spins freely, and go ahead and torque the 1/2-inch bolts that hold that assembly in. You will need a torque wrench. Go ahead and torque those to 75 foot-pounds. When you tighten them, do it in a cross section. So do your top one, say here, and then do the bottom one, and then one here, and then one here. Foot-pounds. Torque all 4 of them. So you've got your 4 1/2-inch bolts torqued against your axle assembly, and you've got your caliper bracket clocked right to where the 4 bolts are facing back against the cover. At this point, you're obviously going to start digging in your box and pulling out more parts. You're going to find a DBK 9 set That's where you'll find that one. And then the caliper bracket you'll find in the BK9 TRK set. That's the truck bracket kit for your caliper mounting bracket. What you'll find is a CS, get this where you see it, CS B9 TRK. This is the correct caliper bracket that you need. Now the other thing you're going to get in your kit is a hardware kit, HWK9. In that kit you're going to find 8 little spacers that look like this. And also you're going to find 8 lock washers that you're going to use. Make sure all this assembly stays tight. So what you're going to do is start assembly on your disc brake bracket for the caliper. You got 4 spacers, 2 per side, that go against the back of the caliper assembly, caliper mounting bracket assembly. Go ahead and set those against your housing. At this point, the most important thing is you're going to use your spacer. Slide your spacer over your other block spacers and slide that in. Go ahead and start one on the bottom. The assembly will try to walk around on you. You have to do your best to try and hold it tight. And take another bolt, line everything up, and set it there, and then go ahead and slide your spacer in. Okay, as you see there, you've got 2 block spacers, and then you've got your round spacer. The reason you use the round spacer is because your axle flange would hit the blocks. So you need to make sure that this assembly is correct in this sequence. You've got the caliper mounting bracket, 2 block spacers, and then the round spacer. So you've got your lower bracket against your flange, your actual caliper mounting bracket against it with all your correct spacers, and then you're going to go ahead and find the 4 lock washers and the 4 silver nuts, and go ahead and get all those started. So you got your 4 nuts started. Make sure your lock washers are in place. All you need is basic hand tools for this. And go ahead and tighten the whole assembly up. Do the outside 2 first. And you want to go ahead and make sure they're really snug. Obviously this is your brake system, so it's important that everything's tight. Okay, those 4 are tight. All you need to do this, a pair of 9/16 inch wrenches. Use the box end so you don't slip. And just make sure they're nice and snug. Now, you want to zoom in. We'll show them what this assembly looks like prior to installing the caliper. You've got your bolts, caliper mounting bracket, 2 thick block spacers per end, and then your round spacer. Obviously your lock washer and your nut. And make sure the whole assembly is really good and tight. Next thing you want to do is get your rotor. Go ahead and place it on your axle flange. Take a couple of your lug nuts and go ahead and kind of tighten them against the rotor. The reason we're doing this is to keep everything true, so when you're mounting the caliper, it makes it a little bit easier. So your rotor's not trying to float away. Basically, you got your rotor pre-mounted. The next thing is go ahead and get your caliper where you can go get it ready to get mounted. Pull your caliper bolts out of your caliper. And then check fitment of your caliper assembly. I can already see with this one I'm going to have to move it in a little. It's not going to fit. So, what you're going to have to do is actually clock the piston inside. Okay, as you notice, we had a hard time actually mounting our caliper to our rotor. Reason being, the actual pistons was pushed out too far. They do make a tool that you can fit that clocks in here to reclock that. If you don't have it, these will work. Just take this and clock it clockwise. You should see the piston begin to move itself in. When you clock this, make sure you have one of the holes at 6 o'clock. Reason being, your actual pad has a nub sticking out that has to fit into that piece or you'll never get it back on. Rotate, get your spring assembly, retain your pads back on your piston, slide it under, and you've got your caliper assembly ready. You've obviously moved your piston in and everything, so it should fit over your rotor just fine. Next thing you're going to do is take some grease. You can dip your bolts in it, however you want to do it. And just run a thin coat what this does is there's actual slides inside that have a rubber seal, and this keeps them from binding on your caliper bolts. So those are nice and ready. Take your caliper and go ahead and slide it down over your rotor. Make sure your spacers are pushed in, and then go ahead and take your caliper bolts, slide them to the mounting bracket. Make sure the pad aligns, make sure everything stays square. Go ahead and push them in, kind of hand tighten them. Maybe a little hard with the spring in the way there. Kind of push it out of the way. Make sure everything lines up. Next thing you'll need, if you've got your caliper bolts pushed in against your mounting bracket and through your caliper, your 1/8 Allen wrench. Go ahead and make sure everything's started good. And go ahead and just bump them tight. Make sure your bolts line up. Go ahead and snug them down. Remember, again, this is your brake system, so make sure everything's good and tight. Okay, you can see here, obviously you've got, this is your parking brake assembly. Parking cable is going to come through here, and then on the bottom you're going to find a small plug. And what that plug is for your brake hose. Mounting your brake hose or whatever is kind of up to you. Most time what we do is run it across the back. And in this bag you're going to find your banjo bolts, two brake hoses, and obviously you need 2 of these per caliper. Got 1 washer that goes down, and then through your banjo, another banjo washer. Okay, and then at this point you can figure out which direction you need to clock your hoses and stuff, keep them out of harm's way. What we usually do is kind of run it down the back of the housing, and at this point you want to mark where you're going to mount your tab that'll actually hold your brake line in. And from there you're just going to run new steel line and everything from your drop down brake hose to your outer ones. At that point you're pretty much done with it. Well, that concludes the installation of your Dana 44 Scout 2 rear disc brake conversion kit. We do recommend you change the proportioning valve and upgrade your master cylinder. Get the full benefit and effect of having disc brakes in the back of it. If you've got any feedback or questions, hit me up, Rob@dncextreme.com, or obviously you can also hit up Eric at dncextreme.com. Email either one of us. Phone number here at the shop is 719-622-8287. We'd like to know if there's any other videos or anything else you guys would like to see on our website. Just remember, because pretty ain't enough.